Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast, and the month of May is underway, and it was underway with a very typical Alex Palou performance. Took pole position, lost the lead at turn 1 for what's called Alex Palou, but he had a genius strategy and pulled it off to the greatest effect to claim his first proper win of the season. I think he counts firmly in his head, but to claim his first points-paying victory of the season, and more importantly, to kick off the month of May ahead of a certain race in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah, I mean, the race wasn't spectacular. To be fair, the start was pretty frenetic. Quite a lot of drivers ended up going off in the first corner. It kind of started when Palou went in deep and everything kind of checked up a little bit. Pietro Fittipaldi ran into Linus VK, and then, yeah, it was a bit chaotic. And like the first few laps, I mean, we'll get on to Grosjean, Ferrucci having a bit of aggro. And yeah, from there, it kind of settled down a bit. Palou wasn't actually, I think Lundqvist led the first two stints, but Palou kind of, it never looked necessarily in doubt for him when he, especially when he got to the front, because I think it was on the second round of stops, he just cycled to the front, and he just does everything so seamlessly. Like, I've got in my notes, like he just seamlessly found his way into the fast six, no fuss in qualifying, convincing, and then, yeah, he just ended up pouncing for pole in the end. And he's spoken a lot about how important momentum is in May, and he kind of really carried that momentum from initially taking pole into the race. And then, yeah, it's just fascinating how he sort of does everything so meticulously, so seamlessly, and just always looks so in control, so calm, and just, as we've said so often, himself along with his crew, it's just such a good blend. And that's why, when it looked like, oh my God, he could leave Ganassi last year, was it ever going to actually happen? Because they're such a good mix. And yeah, it's the first win in DHL colours for any car since Ryan Hunter-Reay in 2018. But just a classic Palou performance, wasn't it?
Grosjean should have
brilliant.
Definitely not made that the case, but that's a different argument for a different day.
True. But yeah, it was just freakish pace out front, really, from Palou. As soon as he kind of got there, I mean, we had a caution as well. He kind of just marshalled that restart very well.
Just about.
Just about. But even when he wasn't in the lead, I think it does seem he always had the confidence, really, that he would kind of get back there. And through strategy, he did cycle his way there. Through strategy and obviously his execution and pace.
To be honest, I don't think there's really much to say about Palou's race. It was very Palou, it was very the professor of precision, the surgeon, whatever you call him, got out to the front. Once he was out there, it sort of looked not easy, but he makes it look easy from some aspects. He really, once he's in the lead of the race, he always looked very comfortable. And as I said, he cycled down to second and third at points, but it always seemed like he was certainly going to be in it. And which he's not the most experienced, but the way he drives is sort of the most calm and the most professional out of him, Lundqvist and Power, who are obviously contending for the win. And with that, Palou is into the lead of the standings by 12 points, finishing the top 5 in each race this year, trying to beat the record of the top 8 from last season. And yeah, well, I mean, we ran out of words of Palou last year, so there's no more to put this year. But into leader standings, and of course, a really dominant performance from him.
Yeah, I mean, he's just continuing that sort of consistency, isn't he? Obviously, people were like, oh, Ganassi haven't got the performance after St. Pete. There was a bit of, I don't think they were ever worried as such, because obviously they then had thermal, he bounced back, won that, absolutely dominated that. But obviously, they didn't quite show the pace to match Penske in St. Pete. Obviously, there are now caveats there. But still, Palou finished 4th in that race. And, Long Beach gets a podium. Barber, I think he felt that he could have got more, but I think one crucial thing he pointed out before the weekend, I asked him about sort of how he'd assessed his season so far, is that he's at least matched or bettered all of the results from these races last year, early on his championship campaign. And then obviously he went on to win on the Indy Road Course in the May race again. So here's what Palou had to say to me on Thursday. How do you feel the start to your championship defence has gone, and maybe what's gone well, and what do you feel needs to go a bit better, maybe?
Yeah, I feel it's been good. I mean, I spoke about it a little bit at the beginning. Obviously, I would prefer to be P1 by like 100 points, but I don't think there's enough races yet. But it's been good. The car's been really fast. The team's been performing really well. Maybe we've been lacking a little bit more speed at the beginning, as we said in St. Pete, but from there, I think we've been able to fight for the win every single race week. But there was just cars and drivers and teams that done a better job than us. So we'll keep on pushing hard. There's some races coming up now that we were really good last year. So so far we improved or match every single result from last year. So we're looking good.
Right, so Palou was one of the three sort of runaway leaders of the race. He was alongside Will Power, who once again had a really, really good weekend this season. I think every weekend for Power has been very good so far. I mean, obviously Long Beach wasn't great, but it was still good. But obviously the strategy issues weren't fully his responsibility. So fair play to Power. Another great performance. He once again got pretty close in the mix of pole. Didn't quite get it. Once again, pretty close in the mix for the victory. Again, didn't get it. His second place of the year. Obviously, it's only his second on the road in reality. A bit like O'Ward did last year, where he claimed 3 second places by the time we got to the Indy GP. And conveniently, he lies second in the standings now. So Will Power's curse of second is actually continuing the season. Actually, this reminds me of something. Does anyone see Palou's fastest lap time?
I did, yes.
1:11.1111, which is pretty unbelievable.
Try and match that.
Wow.
That is phenomenal.
He'll say the 11th win of his career if you include Thermal. So that's some conspiracy stuff going on the podcast here. But yeah, if you didn't know, Palou's fastest lap was a 1:11.1111. Anyway, back to Power and what's going on with all these numbers earlier. But yeah, solid performance from Power this weekend. Finished second in the end. I don't think he really had the pace of Palou, who's really in the mix. And on the only restart we had, he was obviously contending, and Palou got a bit scuffy on the apex, which sort of pushed Power a little bit wide, which sort of hampered him there. But I think Power will be very happy with second. I think he said there's not really too much more he could have done. So another good effort from Power there.
Yeah, he came on in one of the post-race interviews, and when he asked what he could do differently, like I said, he said like there's nothing really to do. It's everyone's looking for perfection. Palou had it, and kind of he just didn't seem he had it. You know, he kind of felt like if he kind of got pole in qualifying, then maybe it'd be okay, and like maybe it'd be a better result for him going into the race. But in terms of the race, he was just like, there's nothing much to do. It's perfection. He didn't kind of get there, and I think that's just it. He just couldn't kind of catch up. He had a really good race, but Palou was always ahead and was always just doing better.
Yeah, he echoed that in the press conference as well after the race, that really it's, you have to be absolutely perfect, and he felt they were about as close as they could be to perfection, and still couldn't beat Palou, which I guess is testament to the level that Palou is once again performing at. But yeah, this for me has sort of it's a bit like Power's 2022 season again. He's showing excellent consistency, and it's not just consistently finishing in the top 5. 3 second places, as you said, Dan, two on the road, but 3 second places in the first 4 points races that's a very good return. And again, it kind of shows the job that Palou's doing, that Power isn't top of the championship from that. Just missed out in qualifying again. I think Newgarden had said that Power kind of looked like he was the one to beat for pole, and it was just a slide in the final corner before the timing line that I guess prevented Power from pole and his third successive front row as well. But still, it's 3 successive top 3 qualifying finishes after, as we have said, only making 1 fast 6 on in 12 road and street course races last year. So massive improvement there. Obviously, he's not got all of the off-track stuff with his wife's ill health again. That's all much better now. Liz was at the track this weekend, as always, watching nervously on a phone as Power qualifies. And then, into the race, I think Power probably could have led. I think it was after the first stop, but he got stuck behind Ericsson, which kind of held him back a little bit. I can't imagine he was too happy with that sort of traffic. But he showed good pace, and I think, as we've said, he kind of maximised it. And he said a bit last week that having not won a race, it's starting to weigh on him a little bit, and that weight goes on. But yeah, no, honestly, I think he's doing a really good job, and that win will come, and you never know, maybe it'll come at the 500. One funny thing he did say was that he rues how lucky, or how he perceives Dixon to get really lucky with circumstances for some of his wins, and he says he doesn't care how that win comes, as long as it comes somehow, he'll be the happiest man alive. So yeah, I actually asked Power before we get on to some updates on the Team Penske scandal. Here's what Power said when I asked him about what he needs to do to get that win, and a hint, he doesn't think he has to do much more. Mentioned that the absence of a win since 2022 is maybe starting to weigh a little. What more, if anything, do you kind of feel you need to do to get that win over the line?
Well, I just keep doing what I'm doing now. I mean, I'm qualifying at the front, running at the front. Definitely had a shot at the win at Barber. Had a shot at the win at Long Beach, but yellow fell at the absolute worst time. We're there. It'll come if you keep knocking on the door. So it's going to keep doing what I'm doing. Very, very motivated to win a race here soon.
So obviously you noted 2022 again, and he's actually started the season a lot better. I sort of noted that post-race yesterday about how Power's performances are eerily similar to 2022. Sort of how Dixon's got around the last few years, where he's not really the quickest, but he's still getting those consistent performances in, which in a sort of course for a title race is what's important. You look back to 2022 and Power got 9 podiums across the course of 17 races, which obviously was hugely instrumental with an extra 3 4th places. And I feel like every race this year he's sort of been the second quickest. Obviously St. Pete's is a bit different because of all the qualifications, but Long Beach, you can only argue Dixon was better than Power in some ways. Alabama, only McLaughlin was better. IMS, only Palou was better. But you don't have to be the quickest on every given weekend. If you're the second quickest for the course of the season, that's what's going to win Power titles. And I think he's started very well, particularly compared to some of his teammates who we'll get on to a bit later. Indy's obviously going to be an important month for them because we know that the last few years hasn't been the easiest place for Power. He's only he hasn't finished inside the top 14 at Indy, some of the top 13 since 2019. So he's got some work to do there. Obviously, very telling story, and one of the stories that goes with Will Power is that his strategist Ron Rzucki and 3 other Team Penske officials have been suspended due to the push to pass saga in St. Petersburg, which means they're ruled out not only of last race but as well as the Indy 500.
Yeah, so both Power and Newgarden lost their strategists, which, by the statements put out by Penske, seems more those guys because, Newgarden's strategist is Tim Sundrick, who is the team president. Ron Rzucki, Will Power's strategist, is the managing director of Penske. So they are essentially the 2 guys that lead the operation, which is owned by Roger Penske. And I think, the other people that were suspended was Newgarden's race engineer, Luke Mason, and then the team's lead data engineer, who also works on Power's number 12 car, Robbie Atkinson. So yeah, they basically decided, I think, that I don't know whether Sindrick and Rzucki decided this themselves or whether this was kind of just a collective decision with Roger Penske. But the decision was come to that, these are the leads of the operation. They've probably got to not just leave the other 2, leave Atkinson, leave Mason on an island and, take responsibility because they are, at the end of the day, in charge of this Team Penske IndyCar program. So obviously that leaves Newgarden in a tricky situation for the month of May without their strategists who play absolutely, let's get this right, pivotal roles. But I think just kind of getting into why it's happened and our thoughts on it, you almost feel like the stand had to be made because it is Penske, because Roger Penske owns the series. He owns the Indianapolis Motor Speedway as well as being the team owner at Penske. And he can't be shown to be biased, as some have accused, because of this conflict of interest of owning the series as well as the team. And, the series obviously handed out the punishments with the disqualifications and, the 10-point deduction for Power. But yeah, it's a massive stand. And it was huge news because, they've got an Indy 500 to defend, and to take away some of the key personnel behind how the operation works, it's big stuff. And, both of the drivers spoke about there's a lot of depth, and that helped compensate for it. And actually, in fairness, the weekend went relatively smoothly for, at least on Power's side, and for Newgarden, it was up until the race. And Power's, I think, race engineer, David Faustino, he basically was doing double duty as a strategist as well. And to be fair, I don't think Power had any quibbles with the strategy yesterday. Yeah, he came out behind Ericsson at one point, but that wasn't really due to strategy. That was just misfortune. So, they've worked together for a long time. So that was all fine. And then there was also Paolo Trentino Filio, who was just a lesser data engineer, was kind of promoted in Atkinson's absence. But it felt a bit harsh on Power. I think that, he didn't do any wrongdoing. He didn't press the button in St. Pete, but he still had 2 people taken off his stand. But just because of their specific roles, that at the end of the day had to happen, because the lead data engineer, for instance, you'd expect they should be spotting this in the data. But I'm not sure the situation or the decision really answers any questions. I don't think it raises any more questions either, but I think it's a stand that I really respect from Roger Penske, especially at a time as big as the month of May. McLaughlin got off lightly. He did press the button. I know he continues to say, it was inadvertent. He didn't lose anyone off his stand while Power did.
It sounds weird, but it wasn't that much of a surprise. Like the drivers have had their punishment. They've been disqualified and they've had all of that. But I feel like if the team didn't take some sort of responsibility other than just statements, I feel like no one would have. I don't know. I feel like no one would have taken it sincerely, like in anything that they were saying. At least that's kind of what I would take that as. So it's for them to just do that, and to do that to quite an extreme just kind of shows that maybe those caught out in it, but they've kind of, I don't know what other word, but taken that responsibility. And
I don't think it's easy for Roger Penske, because he's got to fit in the interest of his own team, so that's the interest of the series. And there's been sort of an argument, maybe did he go over harsh on his own team just to prove that there is no sort of difference between, there is a difference between his interest in the series and his interest in the team. It's a brave move when you've got the Indy 500 coming up, but it's quite a stance. And we'll never know whether it was true cheating or not, or whether it was just a genuine mistake. Does this sort of suggest either? Probably not. But the fundamental thing is, if they didn't cheat, Penske missed a crucial bit of information which no one else missed. And for the team called Penske Perfect, you can't be making these sort of mistakes. So fair play to Roger. He's made a big call there, and we'll see how that pays off in May. I mean, the team were pretty confident before. The same confidence levels now. That's yet to be seen, but we'll find out in about 3 days' time. So that's not all bad.
I think Power's been very, very confident in the last few weeks, saying that he believes they've got a car for the front row. Even Pole, after a tricky few years in qualifying, he was the only Penske car to make it into the Fast 12 last year, but they haven't qualified well as much as they maybe have gone well in the race, as shown last year by Newgarden cutting through the field. I think Power remains fairly confident. I think he thinks that Faustino will stay kind of doing that double duty. We don't know whether anyone will be added to that yet. These replacements have just been announced for the Indy GP so far. We'll get confirmation, I guess, as and when, but I don't imagine much will change. I think Newgarden had John Boslog come over, who is the special projects manager at the team. He was actually strategist for McLaughlin in 2021, so he took that role back on Newgarden's car this weekend. He's also, I think, he's been involved in about more than half of their Indy 500 successes as well, Penske. So he's got experience. He's been general manager of their IMSA program, I think, as well. So, these are not completely unknown random people stepping up to these roles. These are people with experience, and that the drivers also, they've worked with before. They know them. So, it's going to be, a difference for them, especially going into the month of May, especially, into the Indy 500 the fortnight. But it's going to be a difference, but these aren't just alien people coming into the team. They know the values. They know how the drivers work. They've all been very transparent with one another. So, it remains to be seen. But obviously, it didn't impact Power too much because he had a pretty much near perfect weekend.
Let's move on to Christian Lundqvist, who's the other sort of in the three runaway drivers. He said the podium was the minimum expectation, and he got it. But I think there was a general belief after how RLL performed last year and sort of at the circuit, and sort of the confidence he had that a win was on the cards. But he got a podium, his first podium of the year. Obviously, only his third in his career. It feels like he should have a lot more. He's now got first, second, and third this resume. His lead RLL once again was Lundqvist. I think we all expected him to be strong. We was right in the mix. Maybe slightly unfortunate. He obviously took the lead with quite a gutsy overtake into turn one, and ended up third. Obviously, didn't quite have the strategy compared to Palou, but the solid result for Lundqvist. I'm sure I'll take some happiness from it, although he didn't seem too happy about it.
He said he was happy to be disappointed, so it's quite a paradox, isn't it? But I guess that is quite a good way to put it, because I think, they were targeting a podium at the very least this weekend. That's now, I think, two of his 3 podiums have come on the Indy Road Course, of course. So he goes well here. I think he's always qualified in the top 8. It was obviously where he made his debut, qualified 4th on that occasion. I think he dropped down to 12th maybe in the race. But yeah, he just looks super comfortable, a bit like Palou kind of through qualifying. He always looked bound to, at least get to the fast 6. And he then got that front row. And he looked pretty comfortable out front as well, actually, in those early stages of the race, and ultimately just didn't quite have the pace. But I think it was a similar story to Power, that they ultimately felt like they did all they could. And, RLL brought some good cars to the road course again. Yeah, maybe they'll be disappointed if they felt a win was on the table. But against Palou and, the inch perfect strategy from his number 10 crew, I don't think there was much Lundqvist could have done, and I think he knows that as well.
He was ahead of Dixon, who we didn't really see any of Dixon. He qualified 6th, ended up 4th. Literally, I don't think did anything happen in Dixon's race. He was sort of didn't quite have the pace of the other ones, but obviously he was battled with Armstrong at the end. We didn't really see anything of Dixon, did we? I
think he was just 4th all race, pretty much.
I think
he was just kind of running.
Literally nothing to say about his race.
No, he was kind of hanging on that outside edge of the podium, but not quite with the pace of the top 3. And interesting. This was actually his first Fast 6 appearance of the year. He'd been 11th, 8th, 13th in qualifying ahead of the GP, and his last non-Indianapolis pole was in 2016. Since then, he's made 43 Fast 6 appearances. Credit goes to Chad Smith on Twitter for that. I actually asked Dixon about his approach coming into May. Obviously, I think you said this off recording, Dan. It's now 16 years since he won his only 500, which I guess kind of just speaks to his longevity. But I asked Dixon ahead of the weekend just about, whether he feels there's less pressure when now that he's won a 500 16 years ago, or whether it changes his approach coming into May and he's any more relaxed. So here's what Dixon had to say about May and a bit on Ganassi's prospects as well. I'll go to Scott first. How do you feel heading into May, and does the fact that you have obviously won a 500 kind of take the pressure away, or is there still pressure of kind of getting that elusive second title?
There's always pressure, no matter what race it is, because everybody wants to do well. So it's more of a, it's kind of what you put on yourself too. But no, I'm excited. I think every year that you get the possibility, and especially when you come with a team like this, you get a great opportunity to come back and try and win it. So I know all 5 cars are going to be strong, and it's going to be a hell of a race as we've seen in the past. And hopefully this year we're in it to win it, and hopefully we've got a fighting chance at the end.
Dixon was ahead of his countryman Marcus Armstrong. I said in the podcast last week, Marcus Armstrong needs a headline result. I don't think that was quite it, but it was a pretty impressive performance nonetheless. I'd say probably quite possibly the best of his IndyCar career. He was pretty close to chasing Dixon down at the end. Had a bit more push to pass, but didn't quite make use of it. But a very, very solid 5th place. As I said, not quite the headline result that I was talking about, but a very impressive performance nonetheless. And he's looking a lot more comfortable. I think Palou said post-race that he expects Armstrong to win multiple races this year. I think maybe that's a bit ambitious, but who's to knock Alex Palou down out of all people? Coming
from Alex Palou, that's big. Yeah, no, Armstrong's weekend kind of started off in rough fashion. It all went up in smoke in FP1. He was one of 2 Honda drivers, along with Graham Rahal, to have a new engine put in ahead of the event fail and require a further change, which wasn't a great start. But Armstrong very quickly kind of just got back in his rhythm. It's the first time he's visited a track for the 3rd time, and his best qualifying heading into this season was actually in the 2nd visit to the Indy Road Course last year. So I think there was always confidence going into this weekend. This could be a best IndyCar result on the table. And yeah, he executed. I think that's one thing we've kind of not spoken about him not necessarily doing, is executing a full weekend and maximizing what's on the table. But you know what, I kind of feel pretty confident that he did so this weekend. Yeah, maybe he could have edged into the Fast 12, the Fast 6 even. But he has been very, very consistent in qualifying. He's qualified inside the top 10, I think, for all 4 races so far this season. 10th, 9th, 6th, and 8th. And yeah, getting his first top 5. And I think he said on the broadcast that, maybe if it wasn't Dixon, he may have gone for it, but you don't necessarily want to risk taking your hero and countryman and teammate out at the end of the race and jeopardize your best career IndyCar result. So yeah, I kind of felt he got into a nice rhythm, and as soon as he got up to 5th, he kind of cycled up there quite early on, and he was running there for pretty much the entire race. So yeah, nice work. I think he's doing a really good job at, as much as Lundqvist got a podium, I think Armstrong, I would say, has been the 3rd most impressive Ganassi car. He's often, maybe not in races as such, but he's had one lap pace that's not been too far off Palou and Dixon at times. I think he was the only Ganassi car to make it into the Fast 6 at Barber?
Palou didn't, Dixon didn't,
Lundqvist
didn't. So yeah, it would be.
That Palou mentioned that. I was just fact checking, but Palou did say that after the race yesterday. So yeah, nice work. I'm really happy for him. I think he's really coming into his own, and a bit like with Lundgaard, it's kind of a case of, a driver who was not necessarily a front running, well, let's say championship contender in F2, because obviously Armstrong won a few races, but he was kind of a perennial 13th place championship finisher in F2, Armstrong. But clearly F2 isn't everything, because you're seeing a lot of these drivers come over, even if they're not champions, and doing pretty well. So yeah, I'm very pleased with how it's going for him.
He was ahead of the other Kiwi, Scott McLaughlin, who had quite a quiet race, to be honest, but he sort of cycled through the front through a conveniently timed caution for him after Luca Giotto spun at turn 10. That sort of elevated his race, because he was sort of struggling in the teens. He's ended up in 6th place. Again, one of those bits of Dixon, we didn't really see any of Scott McLaughlin all weekend, but ended up 6th place, which I think he'll be pretty content with.
Yeah, though he was caught up at the start. He was one of the drivers that ended up going off at the start, which is how he ended up so far down the field. He, incidentally was the lowest Penske qualifier, despite being the one who had his complete team without any suspensions on his stand. So yeah, but he was just slap bang in the middle of the pack. I think I think it was 13th he started. Went into anti-stall on the grass, right to the back of the pack. But I guess for the misfortune at the end, he got all that fortune from the caution and fortuitously made his way up to 6th. But not all of it was fortune. I think he was going long on quite a few stints, and yeah, a very good recovery drive. One of a few recovery drives, as we will get onto next.
Which is Colin Herta, who had a bit of a disaster in qualifying because team miscalculated his fuel load. Qualified 24th in the end, which wasn't a great start to the weekend, and then was hit by Marcus Ericsson at the start. And he had a few words for his teammate, but like he sort of done in Barber, he sort of just cycled his way up closer to the front very, very quietly, and he's ended up with a really solid P7. And we talk about the value of momentum and value of consistency. That's another top 8. That's what Palou managed to do every race last year, and his last 4th in the standings, equal points with Dixon for 3rd, but a very, very good result for Herta once again, all things considered.
I mean, Andretti as a whole, they seem to be struggling a little bit on road courses, because I think thermal was a struggle for them. Obviously, Herta did the audacious tactic, managed to come back through the field, but they were slow at thermal, and then come to Barber, they were pretty slow again, actually, and it didn't really seem to change on the Indy road course. I think most of their drivers were pretty happy with how the car felt, but it was just lacking speed. And obviously, yeah, qualifying was a disaster for Herta. It was an error. Rob Edwards said it was human error, and Herta was very annoyed. And the first of a few times he got very annoyed on the radio, said it was a bit of a screw up. And yeah, as he was hit by Ericsson early on, he said he was a piece of bleep. You can insert whatever word you like there. He wasn't happy post-race either. He said he was so dumb. He said he felt like he was raced like an ass. But yeah, it's a bit weird because there was a lot's been made of Herta kind of becoming more mature in his approach, which is kind of enabling this consistency. But at the same time, he was getting quite het up and frustrated over the radio. But I guess ultimately he calmed down, or at least part of him calmed down a little bit, and he kind of put it to the back, all of this frustration. Obviously, the incident with Ericsson, which was a bit silly. I don't think it was exactly the right way to race your teammate from Ericsson, though it did look like he just inadvertently lost the car. Obviously, wasn't going to be something intentional. But yeah, I think generally somehow managed to collect himself and very quickly actually seemed to cycle back into the top 10 and never looked back after that. So yeah, that's the sort of drive, if he does go on later in the season to be in contention for a championship, that you'll look back on and think, okay, yeah, they are the drives that define championships sometimes. So
I think he believed as well that he could have done better, but kind of, he said the post-race interview and how he still didn't have any kind words, but he also was saying how he thought it was a bit stupid just for the fact of he was leading, so it was like championship wise, and he just doesn't think that should be something that's happening. And I think without it, he still believes that he could be maybe leading it. I think maybe without it, depending on how the race would go. And I think it's just very frustrating for him. And I think the reason that he kind of came on the radios and kind of spoke how he did was because he was leading the championship going into it. And I think if he wasn't, then maybe it wouldn't have been that bad. But who knows? Like I said, it wasn't intentional at all.
Well, Ericsson obviously didn't do it deliberately. I think it was a bit messy, but it's not like he went out his way to push Colton off track. So
exactly.
Anyway, he was ahead of Alexander Rossi. Did we really see any of Alexander Rossi? Not too much. I can't remember anything that he did.
Yeah, I mean, he got into the Fast 12, I think, for the first time this year. I'm not aware that he got in. I could be remembering that wrong, but off the top of my head, I don't think he got into he's been in the Fast 12 for this weekend, and then very, very marginally missed out on the Fast 6. I think it was 200. So that's a lot better. I think qualifying pace has been their sort of big struggle, and the race car's actually always been pretty good. But on the one time that he does start a bit higher up, he actually ends up dropping a position there.
He was ahead of Ray, who had quite a dramatic engine blowout on Friday morning, which saw him get a replacement engine. Didn't quite have the pace of his teammate Christian Lundqvist. Ended up 9th in the end, which is the same position he qualified. I think it was pretty disappointing, wasn't he, that he didn't qualify for the Fast 6. I remember him being pretty angry after qualifying again.
Yeah, again.
The second race in a row. His race wasn't too bad. I mean, it was all right, but where I think they were last year, maybe is why he is a bit disappointed. Yeah,
it was just exactly the same case, I think, as Lundqvist. They probably felt more was on the table. Obviously, he was in contention for the win back in... when was it? Was it July, the second Indy Road Course race last year?
August. I thought it was autumn. Yeah. August, I think, yeah.
July, August, whenever it was. So, yeah, I think compared to that, a bit disappointing. His pace was all right, but there always seems to be something not quite there for him.
He was ahead of Felix Rosenqvist, who made a decent recovery because he was involved in the medley on lap 1, and I remember him going off again at some point early on at turn 7. He was last by quite a distance, ended up P10. Again, don't really know how he ended up there, but fair play to Felix Rosenqvist. His all right starts the season continues. First race that you did get in the Fast 6, got in the Fast 10, but not the Fast 6, Fast 10, Fast 12. Sorry, it's been a long day. But no Fast 6 in this occasion. But to be fair, P10, I think, all things considered, isn't a bad result considering the mess he was on after the first couple of laps.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, he was the fastest, air quotes, Andretti car again. Like, I think it very much is regarded. I don't know whether it's just because Mayashanka having a good season, but it is very much regarded that they are part of the Andretti team. They have 5 Andretti cars, I think. I don't know whether it might even have been, was it Rob Edwards or Brian Herta? One of the sort of senior people at Andretti in an interview on the broadcast mentioned Rosenqvist's performance. But again, it's just a case of the sort of, how do you call it, satellite team, the allies outperforming the team that they have forged an alliance with.
He was ahead of Carl Kirkwood. Did we see anything from Kirkwood? I can't remember seeing much from Kirkwood, to be honest. It's one of those that people just sort of vanished.
There was a little bit where he had to come in a bit early, I think, for a pit. And I think he also had to tear off because he couldn't say anything out out of the window, but other than that, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that's a general thing. Apparently, they have issues with sort of visibility on the Indy Road Course, just with oil or different things, debris, marbles coming off the track. So I think that was part of that. I think he might have been caught up at the start. You can't really tell from the aerial view.
Like 10 people. It's
you
hard.
can't really
hard
tell,
to
can you,
say
from the
that.
aerial view, because especially when you've got about 3 or 4 cars that look exactly the same. He was probably the fastest. No, call it works Andretti car, I guess. Not that it's a works team, but the main Andretti team. He was probably the quickest of all of them this weekend, and decent consistency from Kirkwood, but he still needs to crack that non-win top 5. I mean, I guess he'd prefer his next top 5 to be a win, but so yeah, decent consistency is there for Kirkwood, which I think is one thing he has been wanting to develop a little bit.
He was ahead of Grosjean. Should we talk about his newfound rivalry?
Yeah.
From Ferrucci,
Feels like the right time.
The latest driver for Ferrucci to have an argument with. It's all started off in practice where Ferrucci made a opportunistic move up the inside of turn 11. I don't think it was absolutely wild, but
except for the fact it was on the install lap.
I didn't know that, to be fair.
Yeah, I think it was on the install lap, apparently.
And then Ferrucci had a few words after that, and then in the race he just drove him off the track, which was quite funny.
But it was being milked, wasn't it? I think when it initially happened, he gave a middle finger to Grosjean in I think it was warm up, wasn't it? And then from there, the commentary crew were all over this, and social media was all over it. The IndyCar socials, good on them. This sort of thing, as long as it's harmless, because I think Ferrucci made a comment. Well, he'd made a comment the day before about, he's not out here to make friends. I think that was the day before anyway. So then this happens, and he says, the cars are robust enough that I can just hit him, which isn't a great thing to say. But as long as it remains sort of harmless.
I don't think that's probably the intention of what he's trying to say.
No,
I think it was,
not.
as we were sort of saying in Alabama, these cars can have a bit of will-to-will action without.
But a little bit of harmless animosity is good for the series. You like this sort of rivalry. It's no fun if everyone's just buddy and really kind to each other. So, yeah, I mean, it was let's be frank, it was a terrible move from Ferrucci. He just completely ran him off the track. But sort of thing can be entertaining from a neutral standpoint. I mean, I get it completely from Grosjean's side that it's just completely annoying, and I'm fine with people racing to the limit wheel to wheel, but when you're intentionally driving someone off the track like that is worthy of a penalty. I think, did Ferrucci get penalised for it? I don't believe he did get penalised for it.
I don't think so.
But I think there is a limit, and I think he may have slightly overstepped that mark.
I would also say, though, if it wasn't Grosjean, I don't think he's doing that. It's the argument to be had there.
No, that's the thing.
I think the sort of off-track drama all adds to it.
Yeah, but I think they were both kind of before the race saying, "Yeah, no, it's all fine, it's all over with." And then as soon as they come together, they find themselves together on track in those early laps. Oh, it was never going to be over. So, yeah, fireworks. Ferrucci's day ended with a mechanical in the end. He was quickly re-overtaken by Grosjean. Actually, that's why I thought he might have had a penalty, but he just.
But everyone said there might be the second incident. I don't think there was. I think.
Yeah, no, it was Grosjean got past, just no fuss. I think
he was ahead of Palou Award. Deary me, the Award disaster, annual disaster, weekly disaster at this moment in time continues. Had his engine catastrophically blow out in warm up, and then he seemed to have some sort of engine issue where he wasn't getting power down the straight, and sort of saw him capitulate to 13th, and another bit of a nightmare result. But I think I noticed yesterday he's still joint 6th in the standings, which is. Sort of shows how unpredictable it's been this year and how varied it's been, because it feels, last few races Award has been pretty dismal, and he's still joint 6th in the standings.
It hasn't been a great start to the season for Award. I don't even think he's legitimately counting the win, because at the end of the day he didn't lead a lap. I think he would much rather have a win on track, obviously. But since St. Pete, and I mean, he wasn't particularly a factor either at Thermal, was he? But 16th in Long Beach, 23rd at Barber, then 13th in Indy. It's just not championship form, is it? And I don't think that's all down to him. It does seem on the face of things like the team are struggling a bit. This was not a new engine for Award, and I don't think it was a new engine for Rossi. So they've essentially just fast-tracked, I think, an engine change that probably would have happened after this weekend. But yeah, just didn't seem to have the pace, did he? And 3 very suboptimal weekends in a row. And we thought back end of last season he'd really cracked the consistency element. But yes, not been a great start to the season. I don't think he was happy on the radio either. He said at one point that, only an idiot would put him on primary tyres. So not great hearing that sort of frustration at the team. As we've said, emotions in the heat of the moment in the car will always be heightened. But speed to find heading into May, and I suppose it's a good time for the Indy 500 to fall, given how strong their world usually is there.
Yeah, I mean, he got a double podium here last year, and I think the thing that maybe he can take a bit of confidence from is that because, well, I guess Palou's had a great start to the season, but all things considered, he's not miles out of it because of the wins. So, he's very good at short ovals. He's very good at the 500. There might be a few rounds to recover this still, but if he's looking at a championship, he needs to sort of get this slump over and done with and move on for the rest of the season. He was at a pit show for Fittipaldi, who, again, not quite the pace of his teammates. Pretty quiet a day from Pietro Fittipaldi. I don't think maybe was in turn 1 melee. Yes, he was. He caught it, didn't he? Because he hit VK and was given a penalty for avoidable contact.
Locked up, went into VK. I don't think, again, it was just a first corner thing, really. I think there was just a checkup, and it's so hard to sort of judge that sort of thing. But yeah, Fittipaldi, actually, to be fair to him, had pretty decent start to the weekend. He got through to the Fast 12 for the first time in his IndyCar career. I think it's a track. I assume he's raced on the Indy Road Course before. He'll have at least.
No, he hasn't. He
hadn't. Okay, so that's a good effort then. I just think pretty much everyone's driven on the Indy Road Course. Maybe it's a good time to mention that, actually, that the race wasn't the most enthralling, and I think we were discussing, weren't we, that just they've had so many races, often 2 a season. I think in the COVID year there were even 3. So much testing there that teams just have so much data, so much knowledge of the track, so much knowledge of strategy that the races can become a little bit dull.
The races, I think they're just a bit predictable because everyone knows it's going to be a tyre managed race. It's going to be either a red race or a black race, and you're going to be quite predictable on the tyres. And there's all so much you could do, set up, etc. And as you said, there's just been so many races here, and all the testing is done here, and all the data is gathered here, where the races can be a bit predictable. And I think it's just a bit disappointing because you're in May at Indianapolis with cars on track, and you want to sort of start that off with a big bang, a big excitement to bring in the 500, and it just never quite happens. Sort of the last 4 or 5 races, I guess, the autumn last year of Dixon and Rahal was quite a good ending, but none of them have really been spectacular. Nothing really stands out, which is a bit of a shame because, as I said, it's IMS in May. We just want to see a bit more. Let's go on to P15. It was given Simpson again a pretty quiet day. Got a penalty for shortcutting the course at some point. Don't know where that was from. Got it on lap 25. Again, pretty quiet day from Simpson. I know, Archie, you said you're pretty impressed with his performances recently.
Yeah, no, he's doing a pretty good job, I thought. There's more to find in terms of 1 lap pace. He qualified back in 25th, but I actually think in terms of the races, he's kind of avoiding some of the attrition. He's not, finding himself caught up in incidents, which I guess speaks to him being, just quite a heads-up driver. He's escaping a lot of trouble that's happening, and this isn't isolated to the Indy Road Course either. This was happening on street courses as well. He picked up a decent finish at St. Pete, I remember, as well, and I think his race pace seems better than his 1 lap pace at the moment, or at least his race management. So, I think it's pretty decent early signs from Simpson.
He was ahead of Ericsson, who, to be honest, had a pretty disastrous weekend. Qualified pretty poorly, hit Herta in the race, and sort of slumped to 16th, which is, pretty poor. Very unlike Ericsson. The start to the year hasn't been good, really. He lies 15th in the standings with 1 top 5 to his name in Long Beach, and this was his 2nd best finish of the year. So, not been a great start to the year for Ericsson. Obviously, crashed at Furman as well in qualifying. So, not been great. And again, a bit of a struggle today. Obviously, we touched on his incident with Herta already. So, not great. But talking not great, Joseph Newgarden, 17th. I mean, what has happened this year? After Long Beach, we were saying he's the championship favourite. It's going to be hard to catch him. Fast forward 2 races, finished 16th and 17th. And he lies 17th in the standings. After the Penske penalties, Power and McLaughlin have bounced back in absolutely fantastic fashion. Power taking 2 P2s. McLaughlin a victory in Newgarden since has been absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't heard from Newgarden after the race, but I think early in the weekend he kind of felt like, the changes on the stand weren't going to make a difference simply, as I've said, because of the amount of depth in the team. But, it cannot have been easy for him losing not only his strategist in Tim Cindric, but also losing his race engineer, who often they have the closest relationships with. He's got a very close relationship with Luke Mason. So that's two different voices on his stand. Obviously, as I mentioned, John Boslog, and then Raul Prados, who's the lead engineer on their Porsche sports car program. So again, not fulfilling too different a role, but at the same time, it is different people. But you know what? He qualified really well, which makes it all the stranger. He qualified 4th, didn't he? But then in the race, it just seemed like he had absolutely no pace. I don't know whether there was an issue there, but he dropped really just to the very lowly point. It feels like he's on the brink of already being out of championship contention. He's down, with the likes of Simpson, Ferrucci in points, which is not where you'd expect Joseph Newgarden to be. Obviously had St. Pete White, just not going his way really. Qualified 4th, but the race was, I don't know what it was.
He had a collision with Harvey, didn't he? Which was a bit bizarre. Lost a bit of front wing on.
Yeah,
on
but
the
he was
restart,
already
but
down.
he was already last by that point. So I don't really know what happened to him. What a nightmare couple of weeks for Newgarden. He's 17th, as I said, and he's already almost 100 points behind Palou. That's 2 race wins almost. Like it's a lot of work to do, but obviously he comes into Indy's the defending champion, and sort of his comeback can start there. He was ahead of Harvey, who finished 18th for the end. He's actually getting sort of happy with the pace that corner's showing. Not faring too badly, especially when you're looking at leader circle perspective. Currently lies in 22nd, which is obviously the crucial spot. He was ahead of Teo Pourchaire. He was actually finished 17th for the road, but he got 2 positions docked for blocking someone. I don't know who, unless anyone else has seen.
He had a late battle with Newgarden where he was kind of hailed for defending quite well.
Newgarden finished behind him, so potentially Newgarden, I guess.
So he was hailed for defending quite well there. So I guess we should probably touch on Pourchaire actually, because
it's been announced for the full schedule, being bought out of a Super Formula contract, and will do every race apart from the Indianapolis 500. Straight away, it seems Pourchaire was really interested in the series, and things have clearly moved very quickly, and all of a sudden he's doing the full schedule pretty much. So good to see him, because I think he's a great addition. Obviously, Barbie struggled a bit, and this wasn't an outstanding weekend. But I think he's an exciting addition to the series, and he's going to be here at least to the end of the season.
Yeah, no, I think it's a pretty understandable move, I think, from McLaren. They've clearly been impressed. They're impressed enough to give him that oval test after only 2 races at Worldwide Technology Raceway last week, which by all accounts went well. I think he said he was initially quite nervous about it, but I think he quickly got into the groove, and ultimately, apart from being a little bit dizzy when he got out of the car, as everyone is, the first time they've been turning left for a lot of laps, he was pretty happy with it. So yeah, I really like Pourchaire's sort of outlook. He seems absolutely delighted to be here. And yeah, for McLaren's sake, it gives them continuity for the rest of the year. I think it would have been tougher to get Ilott out of his WEC deal. We expect Ilott to be running the 500. He's listed in the media guide, and he's just won in Spa, in the 6 hours of Spa with Hertz Team Jota, their first ever hypercar win, the first ever privateer team to win in WEC. So good job to Ilott. I think he'll still be on their radar. Clearly, if he's running the 500, he's still on the radar for next year. But Pourchaire doesn't know what the future will hold yet. I think he's not shying away from the fact that his dream is F1. But if F1 doesn't work out, he sees IndyCar as an extremely good alternative. And by all accounts, he's loving it. And
Teo Pourchaire will be in the Aaron McLaren car for the rest of 2024, apart from the Indianapolis 500. And to support the Frenchman coming over to IndyCar, you might want some merch to support him. And you can find that through Formula Model Shop, the sponsor of DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast, and the best place to get IndyCar merchandise in the UK, as well as the rest of Europe.
You can use the discount code 5BOMB, or one word, FIVEBOMB, to gain 5% off products on the FMS site. Visit the Instagram highlights on the DIVEBOMB Motorsport Instagram for a link to an exclusive VIP section on the FMS store, courtesy of DIVEBOMB.
And you can find the FMS site via a banner on the DIVEBOMB website by visiting formulamotorshop.co.uk.
Stay tuned for exclusive giveaways, events, and other content.
I'll run through the final drivers who were all lapped down, apart from the last one. Christian Rasmussen was 20th ahead of Canapino, who we'll touch on maybe the second, but probably should be quite disappointed because he's really fast in practice. Finished second in practice in the first practice, and ends up 21st. Maybe a bit disappointing there. Ahead of Rob Lundqvist, who got caught up in that one and got a drive-through penalty for an improper pit exit. Ahead of Lundqvist, Giotto, who obviously caused any caution, as we said, VK, and then Ferrucci, who retired early on. Quickly touch on Lundqvist. He was the star of last weekend's race in Alabama, and following that, we got the opportunity to speak to him about the season so far. You said post-race at Barber that St. Pete was a bit of a reality check for you, as well as the first few races of the season. Did you sort of see your first few races a bit more difficult than you initially expected?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's kind of what you go through as well, especially if you've had success in junior series. That's kind of been the norm for me as you go up through the series, and basically every car that I've jumped into, I've been able to fight at the front straight away. And I knew that this was going to be a big step, but I also knew that, I was going to be driving a Chip Ganassi racing car, which, has the potential to be winning races and championships. But then when I jumped in at St. Pete, I realized that the thing is that it's not just 1, 2, 3 good drivers. There's 15 probably drivers that are able to win championships, given the right circumstances, which means that, if you do one mistake, you're going to end up being, P18 or P16 or P20. And that was a bit of a reality check before, for me, because in other series, if you do a mistake, you still might be 5th or 6th, and that would be considered a bad day. But here it's to break into the top 10, you have to beat names like, I don't know, maybe a Scott Dixon or a Pato Award or anybody like it. And that to me, it just really brought forward the challenge of racing in IndyCar. And not just like on a one weekend, but being able to do that consistently. It's hard. Like, people are good.
I'm looking forward to the end of the month. Obviously, you've had the open test recently as sort of the first preview towards turning to the oval. And what's sort of the most difficult thing to adapt to early on in the test for you? And how successful did you find the test at the end of it?
Test was good. It was just a little bit sad that it was cut short. Obviously, we kind of had the morning on the first day, and then the afternoon rained away, and then day 2 was all gone. So didn't get to do as much running as we would like to. But like I said, luckily we have a couple of more sessions here coming up. And I think, again, it's just going to be getting comfortable in traffic. It's going to be the biggest thing. And obviously working with the car and making sure that we're in a happy position. But I think most of it's just going to come from confidence from myself and being able to make moves and get passes done.
And just finally, in the last few weeks, you've seen the likes of Pourchaire and Luca Giotto come over from Formula 2. Do you feel opportunities stepping up from Indy Next, like the one you struggled to find initially, will be more difficult in years to come with this new crop of talent coming over?
I mean, yeah, obviously we've seen Theo kind of come over, but I think it was even Lundqvist starting that even a couple of years ago. So I wouldn't say that it's becoming more difficult. I think over the last 5 years or so, we've seen an uptick in it, but I wouldn't say that next year is going to be more difficult than it was like 2 years ago, for example. It's good to see the European drivers come over here, but I also think that, the Indy Next drivers, like, if you're able to win a championship there, I think you should be given a shot in IndyCar, and that's kind of the way that it's worked in the past. So obviously happy to see Rasmussen in IndyCar and getting to see his shot. And obviously I'm pleased for myself that it worked out in the end.
End of weekend awards. Who are we going to pick as I always forget what we call this.
Is it unsung hero?
Unsung hero of the weekend. Who's our shouts for unsung hero?
I'm going to go I think I'm going to go for... You know what? No, I'm going to go for Kyffin Simpson, actually. Just for the fact that, I feel like he's been a bit unsung across the season as a whole so far. I'm going to go for Kyffin Simpson.
I'm going to go for Felix Rosenqvist. I think he got caught up in a lap 1 saga. And, it's easy to write him off. Obviously, I think with the start to the season, it's almost like not a good result. But I think if you said to him last season, that by the time he got to IMS, he'd still been a top 10 for every result. I think he'd be quite happy with that. So I think maybe a bit unsung for me.
Yeah, I think the team only like twice had a finish better than 10th last year through the entire season. So says a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if mine's unsung, but I think Marcus Armstrong, just it's his career best. So then I don't know if that's unsung, but then again, I feel like he was just really good throughout the whole race. And also battling with Dixon towards the end, I think. Yeah.
Funny moments of the weekend. I don't think we had many. I think I quite enjoyed Roman Grosjean putting no comment on the IndyCar posts, referring to his battle with Santino Ferrucci. But I don't think there's many really stand-up funny moments, unless...
I have, after Colton Herta ran out of fuel, Connor Daly picked him up.
Yes, I was
going to say that.
What? Connor Daly's taxi service.
That's mine.
Yeah, quicker than the DNR around the speedway. What were we saying?
We'll see.
Good luck for next week.
Oh, and sorry, I must correct myself as well. They finished 10th once last season, Meyer Shank Racing. And other than that was their best finish last year. So Rosenqvist's worst finish of the season so far would have been his best.
5 Stone Fast 6 predicted tournament. It was 9 apiece coming into the Indianapolis Road Course. So we'll see how the results stack up following this week's result. We'll also predict next week's Indy 500 5 Stone Fast 6 prediction after this. However, we've got to do this week's results. So Archie, you predicted as follows: Graham Rahal. Unfortunately not. So then you went a bit of a streak with Lundqvist, Palou, O'Ward and Newgarden, and then you went for Marcus Armstrong. So you get 4 on that occasion. So not a bad effort at all. I think 4 is a joint best we've ever had. I went for O'Ward, Palou, Rahal, who unfortunately wasn't on there, Lundqvist and Power, and Rosenqvist, who's typically the first time predicted him didn't make it into the Fast 6. But that's 4 for me as well. And Ellie, you went for Palou, O'Ward, Newgarden, Herta and Ericsson went good shouts, but Dixon certainly was. So that's 4 for you as well. So going into the Indy 500, the 5 Stone Fast 6 tournament is still tied at 13 apiece. So great week for predictions. And I've got to say that good week continues for predictions in the Podium Predictor tournament. Lots of excellent shouts this week. And for the first time, we've had someone correctly predict the podium. It was me, but it was in the wrong order. So I haven't even got the most points this weekend, which is a bit gutting. But I predicted Power, Lundqvist, Palou. So I somehow predicted the podium right, but got all their positions wrong. So I ended up with 5 points. Archie, you predicted Palou, Lundqvist, and Herta, which pretty good effort again. 2 out of 3, you got 5 points there. Ellie, you predicted Palou, Dixon, and Ericsson. 3 points for getting Palou bang on. Josh Mason went for Newgarden, Palou, and Lundqvist, which is a pretty mighty effort. That's 5 for him. Fallen Watershot went for Palou, Herta, Newgarden. That's 3 points for them. Tom Gamor was the top scorer for the week as he predicted Palou, Herta, Lundqvist with 6 points. The Dive Bomb fans, you went for Rahal, Palou, and Rosenqvist, so that was 2 points for you. And the Dive Bomb IndyCar writers were the only team to get 0 this weekend, unfortunately, with a Newgarden, Herta, McLaughlin prediction. So if we look at the championship standings, it's getting particularly interesting. So Josh Mason's still the leader with 11 points. Me and Tom Gamor just behind on 10. Then we have a little gap to Archie in 4th on 7. And then it's a 4-way tie for 5th between the Dive Bomb followers, Formula Model Shop, the Dive Bomb IndyCar writers, and Ellie. So 5 apiece there. A bit of two competition forming of Archie slap bang in the middle. So we'll see how that plays out going into Indianapolis. Right, talking next week. We're back on the speedway. We're going to have practice and then qualifying for the Indy 500. Obviously, it's looking a bit rain threatened, so let's hope that sort of stays out the area so we get as much practice as possible. We're going to be seeing Helio Castroneves back. We're going to be seeing Carl Larson, Takuma Sato, so many names. If you want to sort of hear all about it, listen to last week's podcast where we go over it. But the most important thing is the 5 Stone Fast 6 predicted tournament, because as we said, it's now 13 apiece, so we have to make our picks for qualifying next week. Here we go, Archie, you take us off.
Okay, so I'm going for Linus VK as my first pick, just because I don't think he's ever qualified outside the top 4 on the IMS Oval. And then, my prediction's quite similar to last year's Fast 6, to be honest, but I just can't really look past any of them. So I've gone for Ferrucci just because he's so good at the speedway. I mean, got the highest average race finish in the Indy 500 of anybody in the current field, supposedly. Then I'm going for Alex Palou, Scott Dixon, obviously, Pato O'Ward, and Will Power, if we are to take his word that they are really going to be a lot better in qualifying.
I think mine are similar to yours. I've gone with VK, Ferrucci's there. I put Newgarden, Dixon, and then McLaughlin and O'Ward.
I've gone VK, Palou, O'Ward, and Dixon. I feel everyone's probably got them as shoe-ins. I've gone for Ed Carpenter. Just got, VK strong. Carpenter's a bit of an expert here. He's regularly up and around the fast 12, so maybe they're a bit stronger there. So I'm going to put him in. And for the story, Carl Larson. It's in the script. It's in the Matrix. Carl Larson is destined.
I just realised I've gone against my pre-season prediction that we'd have a one-off entry on pole.
So you're going to predict a one-off entry to be pole, but not on the fast 6?
I have to change.
Something could happen.
No, that's a really good point.
Decision time. I mean, you could predict one of them for pole, and then just not include them in your fast 6 if you.
Yeah, I want to go. Yeah, I mean, I've taken this tournament too seriously. That was my bold prediction. I'm not going bold. I don't want to go bold for the fast 6 tournament. Who are we saying for pole out of our fast 6 predictions?
Palou, definitely.
I'm gonna go the other way. I'm gonna go for Dixon.
I put Dixon. I didn't put Palou in fast 6.
So, by theory, VK should be on pole, by the way.
Yeah, that's it. VK, Palou, Dixon are my 3 that I think could be on pole. However, Will Power seems very certain that he will at least be on the front row. So
I think depends how strong McLaren are as well. Really, I mean, they've always been pretty strong. There,
this is the biggest lottery of all, really, because we just have no idea who's going to. Well, we do have a bit of, there's history, obviously, but things can change year to year, so we'll see. And as this episode drops, track action starts in 1 hour.
If it's not raining.
That's a very, very good point and a very, very big caveat. So yeah.
And then looking forward to the rest of the week. It's Indy. Practice for the 500, as I said earlier, before qualifying on Saturday, which hopefully you'll be able to check out live on the DIVEBOMB website, as we'll cover that event live, followed by the fast 12, and then the bumping occurs. So looking forward. It's going to be a big week ahead. I always love this week.
It's time.
This race week. It is time. It's like the year of wait has finally dawned upon us, and someone by this time next week, someone's Indy 500 in, has ended before it's begun. Someone's already claimed 12 championship points.
I can't believe it's this time of year already. It's incredible how quickly it's just flown around.
IndyCar's calendar is quite good because after the 500, you don't really feel too bad because there's just races pretty much every single week for the next 4 months. So before we know it, the end of the season. We're already there. All I can say is thank you very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening. I know it wasn't the greatest race of all time, which probably didn't lead to the greatest race of the year of all time, but hopefully we'll have a lot more to talk about next week as the stories of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway continue for qualifying for the 108th running of the Indianapolis 500. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we'll see you then.